national level webinar mentor, Dr. Prahlad Reddy sir, and also I also welcome to Dr. Kanyakumari madam, Dr. Annappa sir, and all faculty of Department of Commerce, and also welcome to all the participants from the different places at the national level. It gives an immense pleasure for me to introduce today's resource person, Dr. Kumudini Ravindra madam, a chief mentor and business transformation. A chief mentor and business transformation consultant. The madam having multidisciplinary work experience spanning over the 2 decades across the different industries to make a business transformation specialist. And also, madam has completed their BE degree in the period of 1993 to 1997, and she is also completed MBA degree in the year of 2003. And madam is also completed PhD in the Indian Institute of Science. And madam also completed a different kinds of courses in the management, like postgraduate diploma in innovations and design. The madam having lot of experience, huge experience related to relevant consulting services and domain skills also. The madam is also corporate trainer and visiting faculty for the various colleges, for the various universities also. For example, MDP, IAS, IARS, Mount Carmel College, Texas Instruments, and Fire of Consulting, and different kinds of universities also madam visited for the giving of special lecturing. The madam is also having the well knowledge regarding the strategy and business transformation consultant. Madam is also having the experience regarding consultancy, like in InnoMantra Consulting, Power Research and Development Consultants, Niski Technologies, Sky Groups, and Daimler Chrysler Research, and etc. The madam is also having the domains and skills also. Madam also trainer for the business transformation and faculty for the higher education, corporate trainer and business strategy consultant, innovations course and design thinker, energy economist, and renewable and as well as clean technology expert, power systems and smart grid expert also. Madam is also giving knowledge about the technology and knowledge manager also. Madam is also worked as a project manager and quantitative modeling and stimulation expert. Academically and business researcher also, madam having lot of experience. Madam is also system thinker. The madam is also CSO and co-founder Initu also. The different experiences madam also having. Madam working as a visiting professor for the UVCE since from October 2021. The madam is also working as a chief strategy officer and co-founder, and madam is also working as a principal partner like in strategic innovation standard research and innovative consulting from July 2017 till today. Madam is also visiting professor with Mount Carmel College, Bangalore from October 2017 to till today. Madam is also vice president engineering and co-founder for Nurco company. The madam is also chief mentor and co-founder for ethical learning from July 2015 August to till today. The madam is also senior business analyst. The madam is working as a director for various companies, and she is also co-founder for biofuels and BioLotus companies also. The madam having the experience as a senior consultant. Okay, thank you for giving up these opportunities to me to introduce today's resource person, Dr. Kumudini madam. Now I am handed over to Dr. Kumudini Ravindra madam. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir, for the introduction. I'm sorry, it was a little too long. I had shared a other profile that was shorter, but thank you for the introduction. I'll share my screen right now. Please let me know if you can see it properly.
She is going to drift intellectual property and significance in business.
I would also request the others to mute their mics, otherwise there will be an echo. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Can't I, dear sir?
Yes, madam.
So I'd also appreciate it if you can share your, inputs or your questions in the chat box so that I can take it up as and when I feel it might be relevant.
Sure, madam.
Can I start?
Yeah, ma'am, please.
So once again, a very good afternoon to all of you. And, thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit of my expertise and experience with all of you. So the topic of my talk today will be innovation ecosystem and business transformation for 2030. Are all of you comfortable with English, or should I be using English and Kannada? What is your requirement? Are you able to follow the English? It's okay?
Is it okay, ma'am? Both we can use.
Okay. So in case you have any concerns, you can ask me. I'll try and translate it to Kannada as well.
Sure.
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to start with a quote by Bapu Mahatma Gandhi. You must be the change you wish to see in the world. A lot of us, we feel that the world is not going in the right direction and so on. And we are always, trying to change everybody else. But the first thing that you can do, and the only thing that's in your control, is yourself. So if you want to make something happen in the world, what you should probably start with is changing yourself. Considering that all of you are from the business background, I thought I should also contextualize my talk today. So I want all of you to very quickly maybe type out your messages. What, according to you, is business? I'm trying to keep it a little interactive so that I know that you're actually, following what I'm saying and so on, right? So what is business according to you? Just a few of you at least can type out your answers. Business is making profit. Okay. Buying and selling. Okay. Fluctuation. Okay. Getting profit.
Investing money in economic activities.
Investing money in economic activities, communication, profit making. Okay. So very quickly, business 101, organizational entities that tend to be involved in manufacturing, offering marketing goods and services is what is a business. And an organization that provides goods and services to to customers when they want or need them, right? So the economic activities are possible when you have customers who have wants and needs, and you're trying to meet those needs through different mechanisms, correct? And most businesses, again, typically use land, labor, capital, and enterprise. Today, of course, it has gone beyond that. We are also looking at other aspects in terms of technology as well. So earlier, where we were only talking about basic factory models, now we are going one step beyond, and we are saying information and communication technologies. We also are talking about cloud computing and so on and so forth. So the industries also have transformed over time. And all of this also constitutes business. But at its very basic level, it is the buying and selling of goods and services. In the same line, what is an enterprise? So an enterprise is where you are talking about the skills and abilities to take risk and to create profit. So at the foundation of a business is that every business is set up in order to seek profits. Of course, today we do have other kind of businesses which don't necessarily only think about profits, but predominantly most businesses and most organizations are created to generate profits. So it is also about value creation and wealth generation. Yes. Okay. Commercial activity, earning profits, economic, commercial, and so on. Okay. Profit making. And the other most important thing, so one is the profits. The other most important thing is businesses exist because customers have needs and wants, and they are willing to pay something for getting those needs and wants met. Otherwise, businesses would not have existed. And enterprises or an entrepreneur, right? We are talking about who is an enterprising person, right? We talk about this in English very often. An enterprising person is somebody who's willing to take an opportunity, right? Who's willing to use his or her skills and take certain risks to create something that a customer or somebody needs in a way that it benefits them. Okay. So at the very cornerstone is that business delivers value to its customers. Now, what is the importance of business? Before I get to that, I can probably also ask you, why do businesses exist? One is generating profits, but what are the other requirements that a business satisfies? If you can very quickly put some points there. What is the other purpose of business? To solve problems of customers. Okay. But if we talk about it from the from the stakeholders perspective, what else is it creating? Right? Are we only talking about goods, welfare of society to contribute to nation building, job opportunities, employment? Right. So the importance of business, why it is important is because yes, it creates jobs. It enables transformation of societies and improves the quality of life. It also stimulates investment and innovation through risk taking. Otherwise, we would have continued to stay in caves, or we would have just been doing agriculture and doing barter, right? So businesses got created because there was somebody who was willing to take risk, and there was somebody who was willing to say, hey, this economic activity has value and I'm willing to take this extra risk to make things happen. So because of that, jobs got created. They're able to respond to requirements and opportunities. For example, if we talk about COVID itself, initially when COVID happened, everybody were fearful. But if you notice, there were a lot of businesses that got created around this COVID situation itself. Can you give me a few examples of those where there were businesses that got created, or there were new needs that got created which were being met by people? Masks, yes. Medicines, okay. Online shopping, okay. Online services, sanitizers, right? So through this, what I want to establish is that entrepreneurs and business people are those individuals or groups of people who are willing to look at challenges as opportunities, and they contribute to the growth of economy, right? And the other thing that businesses do is they also directly or indirectly contribute to nation building as well. So one of you has already suggested that. Can the others please mute yourselves? So Now that we have understood what's the nature of a business and what is a business or what's an organization and what's an enterprise, we now go into the next step. Who is an entrepreneur? Who, according to you, is an entrepreneur? Very quickly, who is an entrepreneur? Are all business people entrepreneurs? Okay, owner of the business, somebody who is willing to take risks, innovators, okay, creating jobs, able to survive knowledge and enterprise, new idea. Okay, so you're all in the right direction. So an enterprising person is called as an entrepreneur. Yeah, so this is a person who undertakes risk to start business ventures. An entrepreneur usually starts a firm to realize an idea. Okay, we'll get into that a little more in details shortly. And they are capable of putting together, aggregating capital and labor. So money, so they're able to get money and get people to work in order to produce the goods and services based on the idea that they have for profit. But entrepreneurship by itself is highly risky. But as high as the risk, it is also highly rewarding. Okay. Yes, they gather resources and also create resources. And it is the entrepreneurs, it is the businesses who eventually create economic wealth. So most of the GDP that happen, I mean, that a country espouses to or says this is what our GDP has been because of the entrepreneurs and the businesses that they have created. So directly and indirectly, they actually contribute to nation building, to growth and to innovation. And this is also one of the reasons why our country today is promoting a lot of entrepreneurship, is promoting a lot of startup ecosystems and so on, which is what I will be talking about in a short while from now. So entrepreneurs also play a key role in any economy because not only do they anticipate the present needs, they also anticipate future needs, and they try to build the relevant skills and so on. So it's not just gathering resources, as Dr. Samya mentioned, and they also create resources, right? So that is what they do. So they plan for the future as well. Okay. And some of the reasons why most entrepreneurs start, they may not necessarily do so because it is profit generating. Many of them do that for making a living. But some of them, they want to make a fortune, right? A lot of people become entrepreneurs because they want more control over their life. They don't want a typical 9-to-5 job, and that's the reason they feel that they need to be in control of their own working life. They want flexible working styles. It could also be that they have this idea or an interest or a hobby or something that they feel that this is something that the world requires. Request all of you to kindly mute yourself. It could also be many of them are accidental entrepreneurs in the sense they probably got into it because they had an interesting job, or they were not really happy with what was happening in their lives or in their careers. Okay. So how many of you in this group want to become entrepreneurs or are entrepreneurs? Very quickly, who wants to be an entrepreneur or is already an entrepreneur? Yes, Dr. Samya. So there also is an urge towards innovation and to give proper shape. Correct. Because you get a lot of satisfaction by building something rather than just being a part of something else. You want to actually create that change. Okay. So Dr. Mallareddy says is an entrepreneur. What about the others? Anyone else who is an entrepreneur or wants to be an entrepreneur? Okay. So some key aspects of entrepreneurs is they are typically innovative visionaries with a lot of decisiveness. Entrepreneurs typically are more decisive. It's like they are very quick to say, hey, this is the way we should go or not. They also tend to be very curious and passionate. They are energetic and driven. Okay. Something that many people do not realize, but entrepreneurs actually conduct a lot of structured experimentation. They will try something. If that fails, they will try something else. So there is a lot of structured experimentation that happens because they're also risk takers. They are self-starting and adaptable. It is not like somebody else has to come and tell them this is how you need to be doing things. You should be running the business like this. They are usually self-starting and very adaptable because they are constantly observing the environment around them. Typically, entrepreneurs also tend to be good at team building and they are good risk takers. They are calculated risk takers, but they also have a lot of risk tolerance. They're resilient, they're comfortable with failure. They're persistent multitaskers. They don't stick to just one thing. They can do multiple things at the same time. And very often, they are result-oriented. Not all of them, but at least many of the good entrepreneurs are result-oriented in terms of long-term focus. For example, if you see Elon Musk or somebody like that, 10 years earlier itself, they said, we want to put the electric vehicle on the map, right? So they are able to look at a long-term vision and say, this is how the world needs to change. And they are willing to slog for it, drive towards it, get people to subscribe to that idea and build something really important and big. Okay. What are some of the other characteristics of successful business owners, whether they are or they are not entrepreneurs? Successful business owners are typically builders. They are opportunists, and innovators or disruptors. They're constantly looking at challenges and looking at how they can make things different or better. And whatever they do tend to take them seriously. They make it about the customer. They are very customer focused. They aren't scared of the road less traveled. That also comes from the risk-taking thing. They are able to harness technology. They invest in themselves and they're constantly learning. They're not afraid of taking risks. They're willing to experience failure. In fact, you would notice that many people, for example, they would actually be serial entrepreneurs. So if something has worked or not worked also, they would already move on to the next and they would be trying to get that as well, right? So they are willing to experience failure and learn from it and move on to it, to the next. They adapt to current needs of the customer and market, and they are willing to look at what the future needs can be. And most importantly, the most successful entrepreneurs, they become a brand of themselves more than even the company. For example, if you look at a person like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, not only are the companies they created very successful and famous, they also become a brand, right? So they know how to sell themselves. They kind of create, like look at Jeff Bezos or more so in the Indian environment who we have right now. So they are willing to put themselves out there and sell themselves. And very importantly, they network a lot. So they know the who's who. They are willing to connect with people and so on. Any questions so far? Are you able to follow me?
Yes, madam.
Yeah, madam.
But there is a flip side to it as well. It's not all rosy being an entrepreneur. For the few successful entrepreneurs, there are a lot that fall by the wayside. And it's also because somebody who's so driven and who's so, they are always trying to take the driver's seat. It is going to be very difficult for them because the journey is typically, has loneliness and isolation. A lot of them feel misunderstood, or they are not able to, share their personal journeys so easily. In fact, most of the stories, if you read biographies of successful entrepreneurs, you will also notice that there were a lot of other challenges that they have had. And the thing is, if you're in the driver's seat, you cannot blame others when things go wrong. So you will have to take the burden of the failure as well. There is a lot of financial pressure. There is strain on family and social life, which is why in earlier days, people would always hesitate to become business owners. They would, not allow students or youngsters to kind of take on businesses because they felt it is not very, easy or so on. There are higher stress levels. You cannot take a sick leave just because you're sick, because it is your business on the line. And it typically has a roller coaster of emotions. So if you want to be a business owner and entrepreneur, you also need to prepare yourself for this. So I'm not saying that everything is going to be rosy, but at the same time, the reward is worth the risk. So now that we have, kind of established what a business is and what an entrepreneur is, who an entrepreneur is, and what successful entrepreneurs are, let's look at what does a good business have. Very quickly, if you can put some points in terms of what you think is a good business. What is a good business? Can you please put in your points? Any points, please?
More demand for the product.
More demand for the products. Okay, so I'm asking, what is at the back end of a business? What should be there for a business to be successful?
So
What are those
in
few
order
things?
to get success in the business,
Yeah, to get success in the business, if it has to be a good business, what should it have? Okay, ethics. You're going into the moral aspects of it and emotional. I'm just asking about very specific aspects, right? Okay, which problem are they solving? Support and coordination, confidence. Okay, good managerial ability, communication with
Optimum
customers,
utilization.
of resources, right? So I want to kind of take it in a slightly different manner. Okay. So I would say, of course, all of these that you're saying are also absolutely important, but they kind of fit into what I'm going to be talking about. There are four main things that a successful business eventually has. One is it has a great idea that has been successfully implemented. There is good planning that happens, in the sense people know exactly what needs to be done. There is successful execution of this idea to an innovation to a product or a service that needs to be given. And for this idea to finally be executed, there also the company needs to grow and scale up, right? So only when all of these kind of come together and we put the resources accordingly, that is when you would have a good business or a successful business. So when we say idea, what do we call an idea? What is a good idea? Okay. So this is also called the human-centered framework of design, where they say an idea is something where an idea would be good or an innovation would be good when there is desirability. Is it? That is, there are people who desire this product or this service, right? So you need to have that idea, or you need to create that product which people want. For example, during COVID, masks were mandated, right? So it's correct. So it should be something that people want. Second, it should be feasible. It's all very good. Initially, if you remember, we did not have the PPE kits, right? So there wasn't enough technology. We did not have vaccines. So we also need to start looking at, okay, we need vaccines, but we do not have the technical feasibility or the organizational capability to build those vaccines. So it's not enough to have a great idea. You need to also have it being feasible. So there has to be the right technology, or you need to get that technology and so on. So people should want it. It should be technically and organizationally feasible. And thirdly, it should be commercially viable. So financially, it has to be viable. Only when it's viable. Now, for example, people may say they want the moon, right? But would it be viable? It may not be. Some people may be willing to go all the way to the moon. They may be even willing to pay billions of dollars. But it's not a possibility for everybody, right? So for an idea to be good and for a good idea to become successful, only when it addresses all three of these, right? The solution which is at that central space. Okay, let me use the annotate. So only when we have something at this space, right? You will have a successful idea. In fact, it won't just be a successful innovation. It would actually be almost a disruptor in the market. Okay. All of you are able to follow this? So if not anything, just asking these three very important questions. Is it something that people want? Or if so, which people want this? Is it something that we can actually produce? Do we have the technical and the resource capabilities to actually make this happen? And third, are they willing to actually give you money to buy this once you create it? Okay. If you can get all of these pieces together, then you would have a successful innovation and product. Okay. So what we are also saying, in other words, is just give me a minute. Let me clear the annotation. So when an idea, an inspired, novel, valued idea is implemented, that is when you have an innovation. So an idea in itself is of not much value. It's only when this idea is implemented is when we have an innovation. Does that make sense to all of you? So how do we get these ideas and how do we know that this is the one that we want to focus on? So it is about identifying the right market opportunities, right? So how do you identify market opportunities? It could happen through different tools and techniques. One is user observations, interviews, and needs analysis. You could also look at it in terms of innovation-based opportunities.
Service.
Is there a lot of noise? Sorry about that. Are all of you able to follow?
Yes.
Yes, madam.
So you look for the market opportunities through observing the users, observing the environment that you are in. You could also interview people. For example, when they were talking about masks, initially the masks that came were very rudimentary, right? But with needs analysis, they came out with masks for children, masks for the elderly. You had different kinds of masks. You had different price points for masks, right? I'm just giving you a mask example because it's easy for you to understand. And I think it would also make the point more clear. Does that make sense? The other thing is innovation-based opportunity. So COVID, rather than seeing it as a challenge, they saw it as an opportunity and they said, where all can we innovate? So we had innovations happen in ventilators. We had innovations happen in shopping, for example, that many of you mentioned, right? We had innovation in hand sanitizers. We also had innovations come up in testing kits, right? Home testing kits and so on and so forth. So Innovation-based opportunities could also turn out to be good market opportunities. The other thing that organizations tend to do is what we call as weak signals or reverse innovation opportunities. Now, weak signals are things that are happening in our environment that may not have a direct implication on the business today. But if you're observant enough, it will prepare you for the future. For example, climate change. All of you are noticing that the weather patterns are changing quite a bit and so on and so forth, right? Immediately, there is not much that you can do. But this is a weak signal that also is pushing organizations to start becoming more sustainable. It's also encouraging more people to go in for green technologies. For example, another weak signal may be SDGs itself, right? I don't know how many of you are aware of the Sustainable Development Goals. I will also mention it in the presentation later. But Sustainable Development Goals also are like weak signals that are encouraging organizations to create new innovations. The other thing is called reverse innovation opportunities. A lot of times, we all believe that innovations happen in the rich countries, right? Most of the people, if we talk about it, they will say, yeah, all the best things came out of the so-called, developed countries. But reverse innovation opportunities are where we can look at, even India, for example, in the villages and so on. There are certain things that happen. And if you solve that problem, that solution can actually have larger implications on the globe. Some examples of those are the ECG machines that got created. Earlier, the ECG machines used to be extremely bulky and they used to be only in hospitals. Whereas in India, we do not have that option, right? Not everybody can come to a hospital in a city and get their ECG done. So what happened is there were some people who said, hey, can we create something that is mobile? Initially, it was, something that you could fit into a trunk. But today you have ECG machines that you can hold in your palm, right? These are reverse innovation opportunities. So now that you have an idea, okay, you have observed the market and you have come up with something, you say, hey, this seems like a good idea. What do you do next? Then you go into what is called as a plan, right? You plan for how you are going to take this idea, convert it into an innovation, and take it to the next stage of executing it. Okay. So the other thing that you need to understand is whatever idea you generate, it needs to fit into the business landscape. Okay. So just to kind of also highlight, most of the weak signals that I was talking to you about, just give me a minute. Are you able to see?
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah.
So most of the weak signals come from this space, okay? The trends and breaks, because this is not something that you can deal with on an immediate basis, right? For example, the demographic change that's happening, or the forests are being cut down, or there is a government policy that comes up. For example, let's say there is a government policy on helmets, right? Suddenly there is a splurge or there is a surge in companies that are either producing helmets or so on and so forth, right? So technology can also be one of those weak signals once you understand. Now, for example, AI/ML seems to be the latest trend. So everybody start investing their resources in creating companies on that. A few years back, it was about fintech. We'll also see examples of that. Okay. Once you have that, the other thing that you do is on an immediate basis, this is what you will be looking at. Who are the new entrants? Who are the suppliers? Who are the competitors? What are the substitutes? So all your ideas and your planning will have to take all of this into consideration. And when you're planning, you also need to be very clear in terms of who is your customer and who is a non-customer. Do we want to bring those non-customers into our markets, right? What is the business model we are going to have? What kind of processes we are going to have? What kind of processes and products are we going to have? Do we have the right culture? Do we have the right systems to make this happen? So your business plan has to address all of this. Okay. So it's not just about getting an idea. It's also about using that idea appropriately. Okay. To take it to the next level. Does it make sense? Are there any questions so far? So once I have defined who my customers and my non-customers are, then I do what is called as value proposition. So based on the customer profile, okay, based on their gains and pains, based on customer jobs, or we have what is called as jobs to do and so on, we create a value proposition. We say this product is adequate for you, or this is necessary for you because it will solve this problem of yours, or this will benefit you in this way, right? You need to create the right value proposition. So if you remember that first thing where I talked about those three aspects, right? Desirability, feasibility, and viability. Unless you have a good value proposition for the customer will not buy that product or service from you, right? So you need to be very clear in your plan when you are converting your idea to an innovation. You need to be very clear in your mind and in your business, what is the value proposition you are providing to the customer? And it has to be specific to that particular customer. It can't be everybody, right? You have to be very clear who is your customer, what is their pain point, what is the solution they're looking for, and how does your product or service really address that? Does it reduce their pain? Does it give them some benefits? You know, or what is it that they want to do that this product or service of yours is achieving? Okay, so your plan has to be very clear on its value proposition. Once you have that, then you go to the next stage of execution. And execution is again multifold, right? So one thing is you need to be very clear in terms of what is the reality. You cannot live in the clouds. You cannot say, you know, a lot of times, many of the unsuccessful ventures, they are unsuccessful simply because they are not close to the ground. They do not understand the reality. They just assume that, you know, this is what the customer wants. And without actually doing a fact check, they just go out and try to sell their product or service. And when that happens, that is when the biggest hit back or this one happens, right? And your strategies, you cannot again have strategic processes or planning as an isolated process. You need to constantly monitor your business landscape. You remember I was showing you this, right? The business landscape, you need to plan accordingly. Your strategies need to incorporate all this. They need to understand, okay, what are my competitors doing? How do I address that? Do I have the right suppliers? Am I sure that my raw materials are going to reach me at the right time? Are there going to be new entrants in the market that I'm not aware of? You know, earlier days, the banks would never have thought that Google could be a competitor, right? They would never have thought that Amazon could be a competitor. Today, every e-commerce establishment is also working as a bank, right? As a financial institution or a financial fintech company. So you need to be able to also change your strategy based on what is happening on the ground. So you need to be very clear in terms of what is the reality, and you need to be able to change, be agile. You also need to create the right environment internally, right? As an, you know, attract the right talent and so on. Yeah, there is a question. Please go on. Any question? So creating the right environment could also mean equipping your people, your talent to actually succeed. So it's not enough to just say, I will bring on the people and they will solve the problem for me. You need to also give them the right tools. You need to prepare them. You need to train them, right, to succeed. You also need to be selective in recruiting and building the right teams. Okay. And it cannot be just, one set of people. You need to have diverse teams and so on. And you also need to personalize your commitment and lead the initiative. You cannot just say, hey, I put the team together, let them handle it, right? You need to lead the initiative and make it happen. Only then you can ensure successful execution. So some of the other steps, for example, this is also very, very critical when it comes to execution. You need to be able to define what are those key success parameters. What is it that you're really attempting to do? What should your business be doing? And then you also need to ensure alignment. Are all the people in your company aligned to what is success, right? You need to be able to take accountability. If something is not working out right, who takes accountability? What do they do about it? And that's not enough. You also need to monitor and track over time, right? We were talking about how you periodically review and reflect and you change if need be, right? So a successful business will happen only when you are able to manage change better. Okay. So all of these steps are very, very critical for a successful execution. But it doesn't stop here. Maybe you have done all of this and you are at this stage today. But does that ensure sustainable success? Sustainable success will happen only when you can show consistent growth and scaling over time. I'm not saying we need to build monoliths of businesses, but there has to be a scalable option built into the companies. Now, can you give me examples of companies that had amazing, successful products, but because they did not scale, they failed by the wayside? Any suggestion? I mean, any examples? Are all of you able to follow? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Nokia? Yeah. So Nokia, for example, it wasn't able to read the weak signals, right? Technology was changing. They thought their product was so good that people will not move away from it. And they did not notice the new entrants, right? Any other company that you can talk about who kind of had challenges in the growth and scaling stage? Any other company? Vodafone, okay. Tata Nano, right? Parle-G, okay. So the other thing that you notice is just because a business has been successful for a certain period of time or has been the number one, it doesn't mean that it can stay there forever, right? So given the situation and the changing environment, what also might happen is over time, they also slowly start eroding, right? So they are not able to manage the market that well. They kind of lose their position. Okay. Yeah, Jio as well to a certain extent, Motorola certainly, right? So unless you have growth and scaling, you cannot have sustained business success. Shall I proceed? So how do you scale a business and what is scaling a business? Scaling a business means setting the stage to enable and support growth in your company. And it is at this stage where the entrepreneur has to let go of some of the control and start creating the right organizational culture to build it to the next stage, right? So you need to have your next in line very clearly defined and they should be able to helm the affairs. It's about having the ability to grow without being hampered, right? And all of this requires you to have very good planning, funding. You have to have the right systems. You have to have the right staff. And they should be aligned to your key requirements, right? Saying this is what the company is trying to attempt to do. For example, the Infosys situation, I just want to kind of give it as a case. As long as Narayan Murthy and his team were there, Infosys was doing fine. But then suddenly they brought in somebody from the outside, things were not going too well, right? So much so that that person had to be sent away and Mr. Narayan Murthy had to come back in and take on the position of the chairman. So what it also tells you is if that vision that you have as an entrepreneur, as the business owner, you cannot translate it, or you cannot hand it over, or that alignment is lost, your business goals also get lost, and your scalability issues will have challenges. Yes, Tata also had the same issue recently, right? So they brought in somebody and they realized it's not working out. So leadership becomes very, very important in such stages. The processes, the technology, and partners. So it's not enough that I have everything in place in my organization. I also need to start looking at my ecosystem itself. Who are my partners? Who are my suppliers? Are they aligned to what I am attempting to do? Do I have the right technology? Sometimes you may have the technology for that stage, but if I have to go beyond that, right? For example, if you remember the oxygen tank situation, right? They were able to address it to a certain extent. But then when it came to scalability, when I had to provide oxygen cylinders or oxygen tanks to multiple hospitals, that became a challenge, right? Because technology, there was a limitation. So scaling a business is very different from creating a business. So we need to understand that scaling of the business requires completely different sets of skills and abilities and technologies than creating a business. Okay. And many of the times, some of the challenges that businesses face and why scaling is such a challenge is access to talent, excessive bureaucracy. When I say excessive bureaucracy, what I also mean is, the entire the rules and decision making is very limited to the top or the management itself, and they are not willing to share. And what also may happen is I may have proven that my product or service is successful or is good, but I may not have enough early stage capital to build on my company or things like that. So that could also be challenges that businesses face when it comes to growing your company. Okay. And because of this, we also see this in the startup ecosystem. So for example, India today has 115 unicorns, and they have a cumulative valuation of almost $350 billion. But if you look at how many of these businesses have been profitable, in 2023, they're just 23 of them, right? So 23 out of the 115 unicorns, Indian unicorns, are actually profitable. The rest of them are barely managing. So they have high valuation, but they are not profitable. So what do you think could be the reason for this? Because that is going to segue into the next topic. Why do you think some of them are successful and some of them are not? Are all of you able to follow what's happening?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay. So what do you think, sets these companies aside from the rest? Okay, they have understanding of the market. So what are those key aspects that you think sets these companies apart? Uniqueness, okay. What else? Anything else? Strategies, you said. Uniqueness, their understanding of the market. Okay, anything else? Okay, their KRAs, startups to global. Okay. Customer care. Okay, goal setting. So you're looking at internal things. Now, what are those additional things that a startup requires if they have to become successful? Let's say you have a great idea. Okay, you as an individual has a great idea. and you want to create a startup, what do you need in order to succeed? Can you do it alone? Yeah, you have a great idea. You already have a great idea. How do you succeed? What do you have to do, or what do you need in order to succeed? Cool people, okay. Teamwork. That is internal. Is that sufficient? Core competencies, market research, planning. Okay. What else? Again, all of you are looking only at an internal at one stage, right? What are those external factors then? Can you just succeed just with a single team? Is that as simple as that? Or is there something more? No. Okay. So what is it? Okay. Government policy. What else is required?
Economic conditions.
Okay. Economic conditions. So ecosystem. Thank you. I was waiting for that word. So what we need is
Competitors.
the right ecosystem. Correct. So we need the right ecosystem to thrive, right? It's not enough if I just go and plant a seed somewhere. It's not going to just grow, right? I need to give it the right environment to become a plant or a tree and so on, right? And to bear fruit. So similar to a plant, so the seed is just, the idea is just a seed. It is not sufficient if, I have a good farmer and the farmer knows how to farm, right? Or is the farmer also needs the right environment. He needs the right conditions for that seed to grow and thrive. Correct. Impact on community, institutional support. So when we say for an idea to really be successful and for a business to be successful, what we really need is the right innovation ecosystem or an entrepreneurial ecosystem. So what is an ecosystem? Before I go to the next stage, what is an ecosystem? You don't have to tell me what is an innovation ecosystem. I'm just asking what is an ecosystem itself. Do all of you know what an ecosystem is? Holistic development with different amenities. Okay. Structure of business. No, I'm asking about ecosystem. I'm not saying innovation or business or knowledge. Where is the word ecosystem coming from? Environmental science. Okay. So society. Okay. Ecosystem comes from the environment. So for example, all of us, when we were students in school and so on, we have learned about the desert ecosystem and the, the forest ecosystem, the rainforest ecosystem, and so on and so forth. Do you remember the grasslands and so on? So ecosystem, the word itself comes from there. Eco stands for ecology, ecological systems, right? So an ecosystem in nature is the community of living organisms that interact and grow together. And one step beyond is the ecosystem could also have ecological things. So it could also be the non-living part. So it could be the climate of the place, the kind of, the land, how it is, the water, and so on and so forth. Okay. So an ecosystem has to have three things. One, the population of the ecosystem, okay, that has both driven the development of and is the result of the ecosystem. So for example, a desert ecosystem will have created certain animals that are the way they are because it was a desert, right? So we also understand that they modify themselves, right? I'm trying to give this example so that when I talk about the innovation ecosystem, you will be able to map it better. So because the system is the way it is, you would have the population, those living organisms being the way they are. So they not only create the ecosystem, they also get impacted by the ecosystem. it also comprises of the location and the environment, right? So if it's a desert ecosystem, the place is arid, there's hardly any water, right? It typically has very warm or very cold weathers and so on and so forth. So there is an environment to it. And the most important thing is there is interdependency, interaction, and symbiosis among the different kinds of organisms. So they don't survive independently. There is a lot of symbiosis. So there is a lot of interdependency, right? So we cannot really say that this is caused only by this. Okay, correct. How the environment behaves and how the animals behave within that environment also has an impact on that environment, right? So if you also understand, this ecosystem is typically a very complex structure, both at a macro level and at a micro level, because every interaction that is happening between the individual elements and between the different systems, they influence each other. Okay. Now, in the same lines, if we look at, say, the entrepreneurial or innovation ecosystem, first of all, this terminology was used by Daniel Eisenberg for the first time in 2010. And he talked about this from the perspective of the complex adaptive system. Today, we live in a VUCA world, and he said we need to have an innovation or an entrepreneurial ecosystem that will enable innovations to happen better. And this came out of a study. Actually, Daniel Eisenberg was actually studying why certain areas. So, for example, he looked at the Boston area and so on, where there were more innovations, there were more startups, they were doing much better. So he said, what is it about these places that make, people do better or create more startups and so on and so forth. So when he was studying it, he realized that there is an ecosystem that had been developed that encouraged such startups to happen, that encouraged innovations to happen, and so on. And what he defined was that there are 6 key elements to an innovation ecosystem. They are people, the markets, policy, culture, finance, and infrastructure and support. So the other thing that they noticed is that these connections and relationships are non-linear and dynamic. So just because today the relationship is in a certain way, it doesn't mean that tomorrow also it will be the same way. For example, if the government and the startup, today they are friends, tomorrow they may be antagonists. They may be like, there may be one policy that comes out which changes how things are for the startup. So the relationship changes. So it is non-linear and dynamic. Okay. Are all of you able to follow this? Any questions so far?
Yeah.
So when we talk about the 6 domains, right? So these are the 6 elements. So people can also be called as human capital. So human capital would include all of these, right? It would include the labor, it would include early customers, the markets would be early customers. Policy would have leadership and government. Finance would be what is the financial capital. Culture would be what are those success stories that we have created, what are the social norms and so on. And when we talk about support, we can talk about infrastructure support, professional support, and also non-government institutions that are supporting. Okay, so we'll go a little bit more in detail in terms of what these are. So when we talk about the elements, so people is the first part. You require strong networks and platforms that foster networks to grow across government, industry, and academia. So if you notice some of the successful ecosystems, for example, the one that Daniel Eisenberg studied was in the Boston metropolitan area. So if you notice in Boston, what is very unique about Boston? Or let's take, San Francisco, or the, in the West, it was San Francisco and Stanford and so on were there, right? So San Francisco was one of the hubs for innovation, and the other one was Boston. And this he noticed across the globe. He identified certain areas which had a great startup culture. So what were those places, or what do you think caused Boston to be so successful in its startup ecosystem? Any of you? So what's in Boston that causes this? Yes, leading universities. Okay. And its proximity to the government as well. And because these leading universities had people who were alumni in and taking on important positions in the industry, it created a network that enabled the right ecosystem. Okay. So it's not enough to just have people who are innovators. You also need skilled and unskilled workforce members who are going to help build on that idea to create that innovation. But that's not enough. You need to have the right networks and platforms so that they are able to take this idea and innovation across. And you need to have the right government support, you need industry, you need academia, and so on. So when we talk about people, we are talking about people across, right? It's also about talent acquisition, development strategies and structures. What are those competencies that you need to have to be an innovator, and so on and so forth. So the second element of the innovation ecosystem is a market. Now, it's all very nice. For example, let's say I created a mask from, I know I keep going back to mask because I thought it's the simplest one. But if I created a mask, I produced some masks during COVID. Now, what would happen if I did not have access to the market? Would I be successful? Right? No. So unless I have access to the market, unless I have a good customer base, I have the right supply chains. Let's say I want to get into the mask business, but I do not have a supply chain. I do not have access to the cloth that is required or the elastic bands that are required to make the mask. Would I be successful? No, right? So free functioning markets, no. Or let's say if the market was such that they gave a license for every person who has to sell masks. Would I be successful if I didn't have a license? No, right? So unless these conditions are satisfied, I would not be successful. So I need to have the right market. And these markets should be free functioning in the sense the customer should have the actual choice whether they want to buy the product or not. Because otherwise what might happen is, even though the customer wants it, you will not be able to sell it. In which case also the product or your business would be unsuccessful. Make sense? The other thing is, as startups take ideas and develop them into solutions, they need to have immediate and direct access to the market and customers to get feedback. See, no product is perfect at the first go, at the first iteration. So unless you are a business that's constantly interacting with your customer to try and make it better, you will not have a very successful story. So you need to also have immediate and direct access to marketplaces. So for example, if I want to sell masks in Bangalore, I better have something close to Bangalore, right? I cannot have it in Delhi and say, hey, I will sell masks in Bangalore. Correct? So you need to have immediate and direct access. So the next aspect of the innovation ecosystem is policy. And under this, what Daniel Eisenberg did was he said both government and leadership can be grouped under policy. So though leadership actually comes inside the purview of the business, whereas the government is outside, both of them, unless they champion innovation, unless they say, this is something that we have to do, and they actually provide not only the direction, but the support as well, only then will innovations be successful. So leaders who support innovation, they also kind of provide social legitimacy. Now, if somebody is creating something in your organization and you say, I don't care about it, then that innovation will not see the light of day, right? So it is very important that the leaders actually take on a more proactive role and they provide this legitimacy For example, if you look at the 3M, the Post-its, which is a very common case study that's used. What 3M was attempting to do was create a glue that is super adhesive, right? Something that sticks really hard. But what happened is, due to some chemical changes, it was not sticking too well. The paper was literally coming off. Okay. So this person came up with this idea, why don't we use this? Especially because we use so many notes and things like that. Why don't we use it as a Post-it? Like we stick it to some place, and once we use it, we take it off and we can change it, right? So it doesn't leave that adhesive mark also, right? Usually, otherwise, if we have stuck something, you literally can't pull it apart, right? Now, if you did not have the right leadership, and that leader said, no, your business was to create a super adhesive, what you've created is not the right thing, please scrap it, then do you think that Post-it would have seen the light of day? It wouldn't have, right? So unless the leaders say, okay, this is something, maybe it was accidental, maybe it was otherwise, but this has potential, we need to take this forward, that is when the innovation will also survive and the business will do well. Similarly, government institutions play a very crucial role in defining the regulatory framework. For example, in creating those free markets, right? In creating the right tax benefits for the businesses to come in and set up, by providing infrastructure. For example, in Bangalore, organizations, the IT industry did so well because you had the government actually set up IT parks and provide tax benefits to companies who wanted to come and set up their businesses here in Bangalore, right? So if you provide venture friendly legislations, you create better contracts, easy ways of doing business and so on, create the right IPR frameworks, right? That is when innovation can thrive. The other thing that is very, very critical, but that is very often neglected, is the concept of culture, because this is not something that is easily discernible, or you cannot really see it per se, right? Yes. What time is it? Yeah, should be done. So culture is also critical because that is what brings everything together. So if we do not have the right culture for taking risk, now let's say if you fail and everybody starts saying, oh, this is really crazy, you don't deserve to be here, do you think innovation can thrive or an entrepreneur can thrive? It won't, right? You cannot become, so the culture needs to be fostering an innovation mindset. It needs to encourage creativity. So all of these need to come together, and only then can innovation succeed, or can innovation even happen? And that's when entrepreneurs can happen. The next very important thing is the money, right? So funding sources are also extremely crucial for innovation ecosystems, and they can include various mechanisms. So it could be microloans, it could be angel investors, it could be investments and support from friends and family, venture capital. All of you have heard of this, right? Because startups are inherently risky. We already established that. We said that, entrepreneurs, it is a risky business, right? And they are trying to meet something, or they are trying to create something which is addressing an unmet customer need, right? This product has not existed before. That is the whole concept of a startup, because this particular thing was never met by another. And that is the reason why it is inherently risky. But if we do not have the right funding and support, they would not thrive. So when we talk about venture capital and investors, these are the individuals or organizations that infuse capital. They also play a very active role in creating trajectories. For example, the reason why you see more fintech companies is because you have venture capitalists who are willing to invest in those startups. Whereas you will not see that many in, say, energy, because it is capital intensive and the risk is much higher maybe, So venture capital not only provides funding, they actually play a very active role in saying which is the technology that will get adopted. They also support operations, they create business development opportunities, they promote the startups, they ensure sustainability, and they also help in employment opportunities. And it is also possible, it's because of venture capital that you were able to venture into untapped sectors. Like AI and ML today is successful because some venture capitalists said, hey, this is something that we should focus on. Or cloud computing is famous because somebody said, hey, this is something that we should focus on, right? And there are different kinds of venture capital. So usually you have 6 stages of venture capital. First one being seed funding. So it is usually the initial funding, right? When you have that idea, right? So I said idea is like the seed. So seed money is where it's always just experimenting on that innovation idea, right? Saying, hey, does this make sense or not? And they're typically not connected to the return on investment. Then you have the startup funding, which is early stage funding, which only is for the product development and marketing expenses. So the very initial stages that we are talking about. Then you have what is called as the first round funding or the Series A funding, which is given for the manufacturing and early stage sales. So you have a POC, that is a proof of concept has been created, a minimum viable product or service has been created. Then you go into what is called as first round funding, where you start putting in the manufacturing system in place. So this is the execution part of it, right? So if you remember, I said idea, plan, execution, and growth and scaling. So seed is for idea, startup funding is for the plan, first round funding is for the initial execution, second round funding or Series B funding is for the working capital. So now it's possible that I have executed, but I will take more time to kind of get a better market share. That is when you go in for second round funding. Expansion or mezzanine funding is when you are doing the scaling and the growth, right? And finally, it's also possible because these are venture capitalists, they also want to pull out their money. So they are having a risk, right? So they say, what is my exit strategy, right? So that is typically when companies go public. Okay, when startups go public, that is one exit route where the venture capital says, okay, I have given you so much money, vis-a-vis say 40% of your company and so on. And once you go public and the public invests in the company, I will take 40% of the company, that is the money from that, and I will exit. So I will no longer own 40% of those shares. Those 40% would be given to the public or whoever it is that is buying the shares. All of you are aware of this, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Another very important criteria that is necessary are universities and academic institutions, because these are where that free thinking and creative culture happens. And it's also the place of knowledge generation and dissemination. It, creates collaborative spaces, risk-free environment where you can test out things. And that's also the reason why a lot of what we call the TBIs, right? The business incubators and so on are established in universities and academic institutions. And that's also the reason why even in India now, there is a lot of focus being created for setting up startup cells within organizations, within universities, and also incubators within universities to encourage startups. Okay, I will skip this. This is just to say, each of them have different inputs. The activities they do are different, but the outputs and outcomes are also going to be different. All the different players within the innovation ecosystem. Okay, some of the drivers, of course, the environment, the infrastructure, the financial capital, and the human capital. So this is something that we also established during the conversation. So what would make a successful ecosystem is when the ecosystem is also focused in a certain way. So they have to be purpose focused. So it is not just about an immediate response. It is what is the long-term impact going to be on the economy and society. It has to be idea centered in the sense I get an idea, but it needs to co-evolve it. So you need to have collaborative spaces where these ideas can be evolved over time. It needs to be knowledge driven with science and technology. So you cannot just create your solutions in isolation. And it's not enough to just fund ideas. You need to also look at commercialization of those initial, innovation and products and services. The other thing is we need to understand that this is dynamic and experimental. There is also a systemic, because it's a system and there is a lot of interdependencies, those things also play a very important role. So how exactly do you address that? That becomes important. And we need to have, dialogue amongst the various entrepreneurial stakeholders. So everybody should have those dialogues. So be it universities, be it the venture capitalists, be it the government, be it the innovators themselves or the startups and the entrepreneurs, there needs to be an open environment for collaboration and dialogue. Okay, I will skip the entrepreneurial ecosystem. All I have to say is that it is India's, right now, India is the world's third largest ecosystem. We have 115 unicorns just behind US and China. We recently beat UK to the third position. And in fact, Bangalore has emerged as India's primary startup hub, and we have about 43 unicorns. The second place is Delhi, which has about 34, and Mumbai, which has 20. The rest of it is in other smaller cities. So there is a lot of impetus that is being given in India for startups and entrepreneurs, for innovation itself. And this is something that we need to start taking advantage of. And according to one of the studies, there are more than 150 university incubators and more than 900 companies that have been set up in university incubated businesses. And the entrepreneurs or the startups are happening in wide ranging fields. It's like from AI and robotics and IoT to energy storage, quantum computing, fintech, and so on. Okay. Finally, the last bit that I want to kind of talk about is business transformation for 2030. Can I take the questions later because I have to just finish a bit? So the most important thing, just to tie it all up, there are two most important economic activities that create a business. One is the production and the consumption cycles. And these economic activities define businesses itself, right? But what is also happening in the world today is this production and consumption cycles are not sustainable. And because of that, we are also noticing a lot of challenges. Climate change is a big issue and so on. So sustainable development has become the need of the hour. And this, whether we call it a weak signal or whatever it is, this is something that all organizations are striving towards. And businesses need to transform themselves, right, to actually incorporate sustainable development. And when we say sustainable development, you cannot only think of economic outcomes. So that is, it cannot just be profit making. We also need to think in terms of what is the impact on the environment and how is society being impacted. So unless we get all of these three together, that is when we will have good businesses. So it's not just successful or profitable businesses. We will have sustainable businesses. We will have businesses that are compassionate and considerate, right? So, and the key theme. So what I'm also, the reason why I'm even showing this is because if you're considering creating startups, it is better you start thinking of these things right at the outside rather than thinking of them as externalities that you need to cater to later. So key themes, 5 Ps, you have the people, the planet. People is your, society. Planet is the environment. Prosperity is profits and productivity. peace because we don't want wars, and partnership because everything has to happen together, right? Also consider the sustainable goals when you are defining your startups and in your businesses. So when you start with your basic questions, who are you? What is your business? What kind of a business is it? Why are you doing this? Where are you going to do this? Which is your markets? So for business transformation to happen, you start here, right? And what I would also want to leave you with is what I call the 12-point agenda for localization, because we are in India and we were talking about vocal for local. I want to leave you with this. So you have a 12-point agenda. You plan well, execute, assess, and improve, right? So when we say plan, you need to be able to reboot yourself. Be flexible enough to understand what's happening in the world. And if your businesses are unsustainable, look at how you can reboot yourself to handle better, right? Play by the situation, because the world is a VUCA world today. As an entrepreneur, you need to play a captain's knock, right? And you need to scout for opportunities, look for opportunities in the challenges. Execution, it all boils down to doing. You cannot just keep saying, it's a great idea. Unless you implement the idea, nothing is possible, right? So be open and responsive to change. Consistency beats perfection. So don't wait for that perfect solution. Look at consistent work and operate from your core. You don't need to do everything today, right? Focus on your primary skill or your business area and then collaborate with the ecosystem for the rest. Assessment, always remember, unless you measure, you will not be able to manage. So data becomes predominant. So look at which is your business model. What exactly are you attempting to do? And avoid mistaking actions for accomplishments. Very often what happens is we are doing a lot, but it really isn't taking us anywhere. So stop mistaking actions for accomplishments and always try to improve. So if you were doing something some way, how can I improve better? How can I stop my losses? Think outside the box, differentiate myself. Okay. So I also had a couple of examples just to kind of say, how do you differentiate yourself? Because we were talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat and so on. But I will skip these maybe for a different date. Okay. So thanks a lot. And remember, if you're always trying to be normal, you can never know how amazing you can be. So, stop imagining yourself to be just a normal person. You are all amazing. Okay. And all the very best. You can reach me. And here is another thing I want to leave you with. So if you can't walk, can't run, you walk. If you can't walk, you crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving, because change is the only constant and you have to change. Okay. So thanks a lot. If there are any questions, I will take them. And yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there any questions?
I think there was one question, doubt in scaling up, any pillars or any formula for scaling up.
Asked by the
So scaling up, like I mentioned, it's not the same as a startup. So scaling requires a completely different set of skills, and it requires a different kind of thinking itself. So there are several scaling strategies and growth strategies. Okay, that probably would take an entire lecture or course. So, but understand that they are very different from each other. So what you require to start up something versus what you require to take it to the next level, they are two very different skill sets. Okay. So this is about operational efficiencies. So scaling is all about operational efficiencies and making the most of your resources. Whereas, startups are more about what is the novelty of the idea, who is your customer, and so on and so forth. Okay. Any other question?
Yeah, ma'am. One more question is there.
Dr. Soumya Madam asked, what is the
Yeah.
overall intellectual property right for self-reliant in India in academic as well as the industry?
So there are two things to the IPR part of it. One is respecting IPR, right? If something is patented, we cannot plagiarize it and we cannot copy it without giving them the rightful, you know, whether it is through licensing, through royalties, and so on. So one of the biggest challenges that we've had as a society in India is that we have not been very strict with our IPR laws, right? People can very blindly copy, ape, you will have one product here and tomorrow the same product will be available with the next business. So unless we create a good regulatory framework where I can protect my IPR, that is a challenge. The other thing is many people are not aware of what IPR is, right? They don't know how they can protect their own creations, right? So we have several different options that you have, like whether it's trademarks or like trademarks for, you have your copyrights, you have your trademarks, and you have your patents, and so on and so forth, right? So depending on that, I think you also need to be very aware and use them appropriately, right? Everybody can create patents. It's, in fact, India has made it very, very easy. They also provide a lot of support. In fact, VTPC itself is one such nodal agency that does a lot to support creation of IPR and so on, right? It is up to us to actually make use of the resources and infrastructure that's there and use it also appropriately.
Thank you, ma'am. I thought no more questions are there. Okay. So it's time to give a vote of thanks. Now I'll over to Mr. Marutesh to give a vote of thanks.
Good evening to one and all. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks for giving a immense information regarding today's topic. Thank you, madam, for giving a good information